How many of you have been hired or contracted to work on a design project and found yourself responsible for gathering and setting up workshops for SMEs and delivering assets for review, that were created by other people, making sure the content has a consistent flow through like multiple designers working on the project, right? That's not too crazy to ask for. To be fair, that's kind of an ID-ish type of approach. But how many of you guys have found yourself managing client expectation or having to address their requests like, oh my gosh, a video would be so cool right now and you're midway through the project? Or, you're asked to figure out how to manage getting the project done on time and being the point of contact for all the other designers. Right? Do you manage have you been asked to manage the budget or, provide and manage a project plan? Project plan, that's full on it says the word project in it, right? So I didn't sign up for that. I'm supposed to be doing development and design work. If any of those things have happened, then you may have just started being a project manager in instructional design. So, what I want to cover today is just kind of some top tips and things, best practices that will help you really become an effective project manager in the ID world. So, what I'm going to focus on is organization, scope of work, and people management, which to me are the most important things to go through. So a little bit about me, and before we get started, do we used to tease world. So I think it's also fair to say that being creative and organized don't always go together, right? But that's okay. I mean, who hates spreadsheets and budget and updating tasks? It's not my favorite thing. But if you're getting into the industry, sometimes expectations for designers, I feel, are starting to change. So, a lot of clients expect project management to kind of be a part of the job. Or if you're an employee, as things always happen, teams are downsizing, work is being distributed differently. You've excelled in being a great designer. So, why wouldn't you be able to just take on PMing as well? Right. So, those are kind of things that are just happening in the industry. And I think that the more practice you get at it, the better you can become. But anything that can make a project run smoothly is going to win you points with either your employer or your stakeholders. But sometimes it's hard to know where to start. So for me, organization is key. Quick question for you guys. Has anybody ever worked on a project that actually didn't have a PM identified and everybody was just kind of like working on things and you're trying to figure out, who's responsible, right? Thumbs up. If you guys know what that's like. What is everyone else doing? These sound like great projects for our topic. Honestly, coming up later this month, I think we're doing L&D horror stories. So you guys should totally attend and plan on sharing your story. Organization. Why is it important? It is important. And the reason is because the more you can focus and stay organized, either as an individual or as the leader of a team, kind of helps everybody keep on track, make sure deadlines are being assessed. I know managing assets can be confusing sometimes. Version control, sometimes that makes people cringe. You've got a couple different versions out there. How do you know which one is the right one? Where are we storing it? Who worked on last? So, staying organized, especially when you have a larger project, is super important from the beginning to the end. It also can help lower stress, all about as little stress as possible in burnout, which again, if you're working at a business and L&D, always the first place to take the cut, right? hard to avoid. So when you're organized and you have a system that makes sense to you that you can manage and maintain, then it really helps you from being overwhelmed. And I don't know how many of you guys try really hard. I try not to take my work out of my office. I work at home, so I can't say I try and leave it at the office, but I leave it in my room that I work in so that when I leave here, I don't take it with me. Very hard to do if you don't have the organization in place. And then finally on the assets and the content itself, if you're organized from the beginning, there's so many components. It helps to keep everything in order. So you get to deliver a high quality product and potentially even on time. So, how do you stay organized? It can't even begin. And when I started kind of putting this together, I thought, oh, well, I'll list out tools. And I thought, that's crazy. There's just so many. The market is so saturated with ways to stay organized, communicate, stay in touch. The key to remember is it's whatever works best for you. There's no right or wrong tool. You have to try them. I know in my business, we've gone through, I think we're on our third, and I do want to say final project management software. And I'm a big fan. It's very collaborative. We are fans of Asana. So that's what we use. Of course, I think, Teams is available, Slack, there's Basecamp, there's Trello, there's just so many. I say the easiest thing to do is kind of go with the interface. If it's user friendly, has a high level of collaboration, and that opportunity to assign tasks at a very detailed level is something that you kind of want to keep in mind. I do also believe you can go out and do like a comparison to find out what suits your needs. And a lot of them have some free trials. So you can try it out and see if you like it. I think Asana is free. I think their basic level is free forever and it's pretty decent. Different people respond differently to addressing and tackling tasks. So, looking for something that has just a singular view for a person on the project versus the project manager's view, where you want more of a holistic 360 perspective. Some people like to look at their calendars because they want to think about when their dates are due, in a calendar view. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. The most important thing is to do some research, practice in a little bit. Even Google Docs, when we first started, nowadays they have built in. I was shocked the other day. I went in and I'm like, what is happening right now? But it had the opportunity to have pre-populated templates in there for managing projects and assignments and proposals. So, don't be afraid. Everybody's really leveling up on innovation right now. So don't be afraid to give something a try. And if you don't like it, try something else. So what are some of for those of you that do have the responsibility, I see Kiona says, love Asana. Anybody else have some favorites that they want to give a shout out for that you really are kind of obsessed with? Okay, Asana wins. All right. So Trello is a lot like Asana, Kirsten. This is true. So this next part, I think, is really where we're going to spend a lot of time. This is the heart of managing a project. And, there's understanding what is in scope and out of scope. And I think this applies for both perspectives, whether you work as an employee and you're a part of the team, or if you're a contractor, it's also extremely relevant. So having a clear understanding of what the outcomes are and knowing exactly what's expected, when deliverables are due, what's the format that you need to provide the assets in, you know, that's going to be the most important thing that you want to make sure that you understand if you're going to manage a project. So, how many of you work for contractors? I know we had a couple that like just work for other firms. You just provide the ID work and they go out and get the contracts for you. Do we have anybody that does that? Or is everyone like their own boss? Yep. So, Kirsten, sometimes you don't really get to see, like you have no say in building of the scope. As employees, you all are probably in that same position because you have sales folks that do that, which always fun when they sell a project and back you into a date. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well because it happens, right? They don't know what they're really talking about when it comes to oh, when can you get that done? Oh, of course we can get it done by that date. Yeah, it's no problem. Everything is no problem because then they just pass it to you. So, again, when you don't have a say and you're provided the project and you kind of have that start, don't be afraid to ask for a copy of the deliverables, even if it's just that section. And if you have questions, ask early because it's likely that the people who signed the statement of work didn't think about the things that you're having questions about, or they were discussed but not actually documented, which could be even scarier. So, things to really think about when you start to have a project like this in the beginning, the early stages. Is there a style guide? Some clients come to the table with a very corporate, consistent marketing, branding type approach, which is really good to know up front before you start building versus when they come and say, oh, you know what? We just did rebranding. We kind of have to have everything consistent with this style. So, great question to ask up front. Another one, if you're doing a workshop, if you're doing content for a workshop or a class, is there an agenda or an outline that you can follow? Because again, if it's a redesign, you know, are the role play scenarios going to be the same? So understanding what you're actually responsible for is super important. And that's in that upfront part. And again, this will help you kind of determine what they're asking. Is it in scope? Or are you running into that's a little bit out of scope? That's where you'll find there's a difference between if you're on a maintenance project, you may just be doing a repurpose where you're taking the content, maybe they've had some title changes, some product changes, super simple, but then your stakeholder throws in, oh, you know what? We don't use that system anymore. So we actually need to update that. We've officially left repurpose. Now we're in redesign. So understanding exactly what they're asking of you is going to be something that you want to focus on very early on. The other things, again, are dates. So I know we were joking, but it happens more often than not when, your sales folks will come in and they'll back the design team into a date. Make sure that you talk about that and speak up. One, you know, I'm always about bringing solutions with challenges if I have them. So no problem. We can meet that date, but I may need one or two more designers, or we can do that, but we may have to trim down the assessment questions. So again, yeah, I like to give them a yes, but this is, the consequence. So verifying your expectations, understanding that having a kickoff call and conversation with the people responsible and invested in your success, our stakeholders, is where you want to kind of have those questions addressed. The other important part to do early on is who's going to be the person who reviews our material throughout the development process, because as a project manager, now you have one more person and one more layer that you want to make sure that you're accounting for in your timeline and deliverables is somebody's got to make sure we're on track. We may just be brought in to do the development, but if it's for a medical company, I may not really know about the equipment or their software. So we need that subject matter expert that's going to come in and be able to provide that feedback. So identifying who that person's going to be up front, super helpful. And again, helps you with that organization and understanding that you're going to be able to make all those deliveries on time. So out of scope, I think this is where the horror stories originate from, Louis. Fundamentally expect things to come up during development. It's not a matter of if, it's always a matter of when. So you may have a stakeholder that's just not really sure. I know I have a funny story. We had a client and they were launching an app. It was like an app for their customers to use, find out information about a particular product they had. And in their mind, they were just so set on, let's make a couple of videos. But at the same time, they wanted it to just be a self-paced kind of thing. So we kept, as in again, my bad. We didn't really investigate if there was a sandbox for this app. Can you get all the way through the process that the client or customer would have to go through? All of those things really didn't get discovered early enough. So the target kept moving and the scope kept changing. So, you have to do what you have to do, right? But understanding those kind of things and being prepared for them, you just have to manage the request and manage expectations. So maybe, and what we ended up doing was adjusted our timeline a little bit. There was a financial impact that the client had to incur because the change was significant enough that it did affect the finances. But it's all about how you deliver that message. I always offer controlled choices and I offer my clients, of course, I can do that for you. So here's how we can make that work. And you can choose A or you can choose B. So it's never no, it's just always a controlled choice about how you can give them what they're asking for. Yeah, scope creep is so scary, Olivia, but it's so common. It's kind of one of those things where you just have to know it's coming. So the better prepared you are for it in the beginning, the better you'll be able to handle the situation when it comes up. And it can even be something as inevitable as if you're working on a team, maybe someone gets sick. We just had a natural, disaster come in. Folks are going to have to miss work. So things are going to continue on. And so you have to know, how are you going to adapt and still continue to deliver, knowing that, you know, there's more to juggle than just getting the ID work done. So that leads us to communication. This was like my 2A on tips. Communication is always going to be key. And I come from a place of very transparent conversations with folks that I work with. But as a best practice, one of the great things that you can do as a project manager in the ID world is set up a kickoff call and talk to them about their communication style. How many of you all have sent out emails? No response. Like all kinds of good stuff in there. I've got, hey, I need you to review this. Hey, we have questions on this. I need this person to schedule a workshop. Radio silent. I'm looking and I'm like, did it send? I feel like it went. They don't use email, but if you hit them up in Teams, immediate response. So finding out how your client likes to communicate will help you in the long run get answers faster and keep you on track and keep you from going crazy, wondering, why are they not interested? Are we losing steam here? What's happening? So during a kickoff call, as you start to identify who is who, it's also really important, mainly to kind of understand what's the best way for you and I to communicate. How can I make sure that you see my messages and, you know, we're on the same page? Following your kickoff call, it's a great idea to do a status check. We traditionally do like a weekly 30-minute check in. Sometimes they last all of 10 minutes where we kind of are like, hey, we're good, we're on track. Or it's a little bit of, we had a couple of questions. Maybe it's a software question or a navigation question or a product, and you can only type so much. So we save it for that weekly cadence. And they also get an opportunity to provide you feedback. We really love this particular idea. We love the style of this, so you learn a little bit about how each of you is going to continue to move the project forward successfully. Little tip, the fewer people that you need in a cadence call, the better. That way, there's not so many voices that the most important ones are drowned out. So, but it is, again, really important to have that check in to be able to deliver confidence that you are on top of things. Sometimes you can share, it's nice when you can share a visual with your customer or your team lead to say, hey, here's how we are. Project's in green status. This is what we accomplished last week. This is what we're focused on. These are our red flags and things we need help with. So, just giving that overall consistent update to your leader and or your stakeholder can be super important. When it comes to communication, I think the biggest downfall that I see are these next two. So setting feedback expectations. Who works with the SMEs and they say, hey, we need you to take a look at this and provide feedback so we can make sure we're on the right track. We follow an alpha, beta, gold approach. So we give you alpha. We want you to take a look, leave your comments. How many of you guys have gotten, do we really need to go into this much detail, or should we say, ABC instead? Please don't ask me questions. This is not my business. I don't know those things. So actionable feedback, super important. We take it, in fairness, I think we take it for granted because it's something that by nature we get. So what we've done as a best practice at my business is when we have our weekly cadence and we know we're going to deliver something for them to review coming up, we have a little demo and we're like, hey, this is what it looks like. So remove this sentence, replace this image with something like that. So something that gives them some guidance. So they're like, oh, okay. And if there's more than one voice, because oftentimes you'll have multiple collaborators that are going to participate and provide feedback, which is great. I would rather have more perspectives, but somebody has to be the final voice of truth. To identify that and set that expectation. And as you're going through, you tell your person of truth, hey, we're going to send it to your whole team. We love to see everybody put feedback in there. But by Friday, we need you as the person of truth to settle all of the discussions, provide finalized directions, and give us a path forward. So setting expectations around feedback is super important and helps you and your client. So Rachel says, I had a SME last week ask for my login. Oh, right out of the gate, Rachel. Absolutely not. So they can make changes themselves. Oh, I feel your pain, but very realistic because they're like, well, you give them a PowerPoint presentation and they're like, let me just mark it up. I'll just do it myself. But then, you have to kind of talk them from the ledge on that one. So, setting those expectations for how we receive that feedback and then what to expect at each level. So, again, we use the alpha, beta, gold. So, at alpha, go for it. Tear it apart. We just want to make sure we're on the same page. It's content specific. The visuals will probably change as we go through. Functionality and storyline, not a concern at this point. We want the words to be right, right? So, setting that expectation and letting them know that as they progress, then they should start to see things become a little bit more polished is super helpful. And the final part of communication is around having the hard conversations. And I debated, I'm like, is this harder if you're an employee or a contractor? And I don't think it changes. I think it's just hard to have conversations about things that you can't avoid. So if you're responsible for delivering the 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 content in the course and meeting deadlines, then you're responsible for having those hard conversations. And they can look like, let's say from a contractor perspective, I have 4 contractors working on a project with me, and one of them just isn't really carrying their weight. They're behind on deliverables. The work is coming in and needs a lot of edits, those kind of things. It's just one of those things that you have to have a conversation about. Maybe things are happening in their personal life that are affecting their work life. And so, kind of doing a little bit of probing and understanding what's going on can help them feel safe to say, you know what, I do have a lot going on right now. If I could, I'd love to get some of this off my plate so that, we can continue to move forward. From an employee perspective, I also don't think it changes because it's the same concept, right? Life happens whether you're a contractor or an employee. So I think that those are very fair things to kind of talk through. So again, communication, very important in all aspects. And don't be afraid to have those hard conversations. They can really be beneficial when you need to stay on track. And a lot of folks save a lot of time from being able to have that ability to communicate and have that hard conversations. I have found one of the benefits from addressing things head on is you get to learn a lot about the people you're working with, because oftentimes it is stuff that has nothing to do with work that's affecting their work. And just being able to connect with someone, have empathy, and open that door for the ability to have a safe conversation and be honest and say, you know what, my kid had to move back home, or I'm having to take care of a sick family member, or, I just need a couple more mental health days than I thought I would need, whatever it may be. It really does bridge a stronger and tighter relationship with your team, and it helps you be a stronger leader. So hard conversations are good. Olivia, I agree. I'm not afraid of those anymore, but they used to be scary. Before you get used to having them, they can be scary having to confront someone and say, "Hey, listen, we kind of need to talk about your inconsistency. Your performance hasn't been the way it has in the past." Offering, follow it up with, "How can I help?" But opening the door to have the conversation is usually just the hardest part. You got to just jump in. And most people are very appreciative that you're even taking the time versus like, you know what? Ashley's not performing, so we're going to take things off her plate. Maybe pause, talk to Ashley, talk to her and find out what's happening with her before you just avoid the confrontation to salvage the project. In the end, it will make you a better project manager and leader for the team in general. All right. So for real tip 3, the tip 3, people management. Inevitably, you will have to interact with multiple people as a project manager when you're in an instructional design role. You have your stakeholders, the people that either if you're an employee, that your managers, or it's operations, or it's HR, or whoever you are designing for, the person that brought the project to you, or if you're a contractor, it's your client who is, kind of footing the bill and paying for that course or that workshop or whatever they've hired you to create. When you're dealing with stakeholders, it's again really important upfront. What are you expecting? What does success look like for you? And that's a great question to ask. So like what does this look like in the end? And you may get answers like, I want it to be more engaging. It's really boring. So I want to have more interactivity. But if you listen to those words, it can help you in the design process to make sure you're building things that are more engaging, you're reducing the lecture kind of content. So just making sure that you're having those conversations with a stakeholder, it's very different because you're focused on meeting their needs. That's your only goal as a project manager in the design industry with your stakeholder. You just want to make them happy and meet their needs because it's their project and that's who you're answering to. And again, this is where it's important. You may have multiple people, right? Let's say it's for HR. There's probably a couple people who are going to weigh in, but your stakeholder is going to be the one who also has a vested interest and brought the project to you. So your stakeholders, all about pleasing and making sure that they're happy. You're also going to deal with either developers or collaborators or designers. And again, it could be another team member. If you have multiple people on your team, then this is going to be something that you have to manage. The best thing to do, and I think this is something that's often overlooked as a new project manager, sometimes when you get a project, all you look at is the output. Okay, we need 5 storylines done. We have storyboards that have to be created. I have a couple digital components and some infographics. If you take the time before the project starts to get to know everyone that you're going to collaborate with, you can find out who has strengths in certain areas and then distribute based on strengths of your team versus who has the most availability, who is the fastest. Those factors are not always the right ones to base assignments off of. So when you're looking at distributing your workload, you really kind of want to take the time before you get that project plan out there to know who's really, really good at storyline and who has a passion for one pagers and reference guides and infographics and who does really well at videos or beyond or anything like that. So finding out and kind of cataloging how your team feels about the different development tools that are out there is super helpful when it comes to distributing the workload. And then again, same thing for contractors. I don't think it's any different. Some people are going to love being in storyline. Some people are going to hate it. I don't want to assign anybody a storyline asset if they hate it. One, it's going to take them longer. Two, probably not going to be so great. And three, they're not going to want to work with me on another project because I made them do something they didn't like. So try to understand who your teams are and have that open conversation. The the follow-up to that is as the project develops, while you may have team meetings, don't underestimate the one-on-ones and talking to individuals outside of a group platform. So that way you really can dig into how they're feeling about the project, the pace. Some may be overwhelmed by timelines and deliverables and things like that and may not say anything when you're in a group setting. I mean, I know how many times have you guys been to a meeting and your boss is like, "Hey, how's everybody doing?" Who says anything other than fine or good? So you just need to give people a chance to have those one-on-ones as the project manager to vent, share, express how they feel, and keep a pulse on potential things that may come up. It's a great time to ask, do you have any time off planned that I need to know about? The things that you get out of people when you have the opportunity to work with them one-on-one versus in a group setting, very informative. So how you communicate and manage the developers and your team and collaborators is also something to focus on. And then finally, our favorite of all faves, our subject matter expert. So it's going to go one of two ways. They're either going to be the expert that is the rock star and stays in their lane and just wants to give you the feedback, or they're going to be this me that also feels like they can design and facilitate and do all of it themselves and they know all of the things about everything. So it's important to set parameters with a subject matter expert and appreciate their expertise. I I completely given up to working with SMEs. It can be challenging. Another one for your horror stories, Louis. SMEs can be scary. So take the time to understand and not only understand, but discuss. Some people may consider this one of those hard conversations, but set the expectations for what you need from them and then what their lane is and when, right? So we need from you to provide feedback, screenshots. We need a workshop. This is what we're looking to do. If you have to have a workshop with a subject matter expert, come prepared. Have your list of questions so that you can stay on track and they don't take you down a rabbit hole of navigation on software, maybe that you really weren't interested in. You just needed to know about a product. So be very specific and strategic in how you approach. And I think it's also important to establish that bridge between what they know and their experience and how it's going to be applied. Because again, the design team's responsible for the execution, but you are the expert. So I think that's one of the other things that is super important is just kind of talking through the different kinds of people management skills that are required in project management that you just kind of don't expect. You sign up, you want to do ID work, and then all of a sudden, you have all of these different people that you have to handle very differently. It was, to me, something very beneficial and worth calling out as a good tip.